Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm pleased today to share the recommendations for North Carolina's general fund budget that I'm sending to the state legislature. The past year has tested our state in ways that were once hard to imagine. It's laid bare existing challenges and inequities while upending daily life and threatening the health and economic security of people across our state. But it's also shown the strength, resilience, and innovation of North Carolinians and made clear why our state's future is so bright. We'll put this pandemic behind us sooner rather than later. With the right investments, we can ensure our state roars back, creating opportunity for all of our people, not just those at the top. This is the time to find opportunity in crisis. With the right priorities, we'll not only beat this pandemic, but build lasting success for North Carolina. The most important recommendations today will invest in North Carolina's people so they can learn, get healthier, and get the right kind of training for great jobs. Businesses searching for skilled workers and a high quality of life keep heeding our calls to come here and expand. But as we work to right the inequities exposed by the pandemic, we need to make sure that everyone is ready for their opportunity to succeed. The most critical investments need to be made in early childhood education and our public schools. This budget provides more for pre-K and early learning, which science overwhelmingly proves starts children on the right path to success. This budget also works to make good on our state's constitutional duty to make sure that every child has access to a sound basic education. We know how to do that. Attract and keep good teachers with competitive pay, and recruit young people to make teaching a career. Make sure students and adults are ready for careers in high-demand fields of employment. Provide the right resources for students with the greatest needs. Another priority in this budget is making sure people are healthy and have access to quality health care to keep them that way. Vaccines are beating back this pandemic, but the affordable health care needs will persist long after this pandemic is over. We must get health care to more working people, and the best way to do that is to expand Medicaid. It insures more than 500,000 people without state tax dollars. It creates jobs. It helps save rural hospitals. It makes private health insurance less expensive. It gives many more people access to mental health and drug treatment. How do we know all that? Because the data from the 39 states that have expanded it shows us. Now, I know legislative leaders in the past have opposed it, and they've had their reasons, which I've listened to. But 3 major changes have occurred since we struggled over this issue in the last budget. First, the global pandemic has cost hundreds of thousands of North Carolinians their employer-sponsored health insurance. Second, the Federal American Rescue Plan has opened the door wider with billions of dollars to encourage states that haven't expanded to join. And third, on July the 1st, North Carolina will dramatically change how it manages the Medicaid system in a way legislative leaders wanted to take better care of tax dollars. Red states across the country are already making moves. I'm ready to work with legislative leadership and members of both political parties here in North Carolina to find a way forward. Access to good health care and education will get our state ready for the jobs that are already coming. As we've seen with job announcement after job announcement in recent weeks, our economy is moving, and we're telling employers around the world that North Carolina is ready and open for business. This budget sends that signal by encouraging innovation and linking to new industries, biotechnology research, medical manufacturing, clean energy production. This will help businesses in our state, both large and small. And as I've said, the pandemic has underscored the inequities in our state. Simply put, it's hitting those with lower incomes much harder than those at the top. The needs are stark. Housing, food, employment, health care. Any state pandemic recovery must tackle these inequities. This budget recommends reinstating the Earned Income Tax Credit to help those with lower incomes keep more of the money that they earn. More than 900,000 people in our state claimed the federal Earned Income Tax Credit in 2018, and we need a state credit to match. A separate child and dependent care tax credit can help the tens of thousands of families who have expenses caring for their children or dependent parents and grandparents. This helps more than ever during a pandemic. State government has a responsibility to lead the way in promoting fairness. This budget provides a minimum $15 per hour wage for non-certified employees in public schools, such as bus drivers, cafeteria workers, and teacher assistants. It also makes strong investments in our teachers, community college, and university workforce, as well as our other state workers and retirees. We also want our state agencies to do more to view their work through a justice and equity lens. This means increasing the participation of minority contractors, which creates more competition and saves taxpayers money. We must also reach out to help communities of color, and in cases of criminal justice, fix the inequities. We're also recommending a $4.7 billion statewide bond initiative to be voted on by the people this fall. The bond would build new K-12 public schools and fix our aging buildings on our community college and university campuses, as well as building new buildings there. And it would bolster state parks, museums, and other sites across state government. We have a responsibility to put our children in safe, reliable classrooms, and this bond will start addressing the more than $8 billion in documented needs. Interest rates have never been lower, and our economy needs the boost. And thanks to having paid down North Carolina's debt, our state can afford it. Now is the time to address this backlog of needs. It's important to note what we left out of this state-funded budget and why. Thanks to the American Rescue Plan, some of our most pressing needs to lift communities in rural and other areas can be covered by these federal funds. This money can make important infrastructure investments like high-speed internet to make sure everyone's connected, from small businesses to people needing telehealth visits with their doctors. Housing, so people can have an affordable and dependable place to live. Special help for hard-hit businesses like the hospitality and tourism industry. Upgrades to water and sewer systems, which smaller local governments are struggling to afford. My proposed budget for North Carolina's share of the American Rescue Plan will be coming soon. This state budget availability is strong, with almost $5 billion in unreserved money in the general fund as we start the new fiscal year in July. Forecasts anticipate strong tax revenues the next 2 years and leaving recession numbers behind us as we beat this pandemic. There's no doubt that this last year has left many people facing financial hardship and temporarily robbed us of the way we lived our lives. But with the right priorities, we can recover the education and economic losses and lay a strong foundation for our future. Now I want to introduce Charlie Peruse, who was our Director of the Office of State Budget and Management. He'll share more details about the budget, and then he and I will be available for questions from the media. Charlie Peruse.
Thank you, Governor Cooper, and good afternoon, everyone. I am pleased to discuss in more detail the Governor's major investments in education, infrastructure, and healthcare in order to have a more equitable, inclusive economy. I'll start out with some context and preview what we will discuss in further detail today. First, we'll talk about starting from sound, firm financial footing, as the Governor mentioned. and then go directly into this budget is structurally sound. We'll summarize the must-dos, support for North Carolina's human capital. We'll then talk about critical support across the large state government enterprise, energy, and infrastructure and resiliency. Decade contingency and transformation reserves. It also provides, they include about $1.8 billion over the next 2 years for education enrollment. That's K-12, community college, university, and private. Funds for the state health plan premiums and retirement. As the governor mentioned, he's recommending a very strong package for educator compensation. There's many parts to it, and it totals $2.4 billion over the next 2 years. First, it includes a $2,000 bonus in May 2021, so paid in this fiscal year and in this school year, and that recognizes that educators have not received any compensation increases over the last couple years, so this bonus would be effective immediately. In addition, it includes an average 10% recurring increase for teachers and and principals over the next 2 years. That's about a 5.7% increase in fiscal year 21-22, and another 4.3% increase in fiscal year 22-23, or an average of 10%. In addition, it includes a 7.5% total increase for non-certified public school employees over the next 2 years, 5% in 21-22, and another 2.5% in fiscal year 22-23. That same 7.5% total increases would be provided to all UNC and community college employees. And then on top of those recurring increases, the governor recommends also an additional $1,000 bonus for all education employees to be paid in October 2021 and October 2022. And finally, it also recommends additional funds for a living wage for non-certified employees in the public schools to ensure that all of those employees are at least paid $15 per hour. In addition, the governor has a strong package for state employees and retirees, totaling $860 million over the biennium. This includes a 5% recurring raise for state employees over the next 2 years. That's 2.5% in fiscal year 2021 and another 2.5% in fiscal year 22-23. In addition, it includes that same $1,000 bonus to all state employees in October 2021 and in October 2022. It also includes money for a public safety pay plan. It also includes targeted funds for hard to recruit and retain position and for agencies that have compression issues. And finally, and also very importantly, it includes money for a retiree recurring COLA of 2%, as well as an additional 2% retiree bonus in each fiscal year. Now we'll transition to some of the substantive expansion recommendations and investments in education. Includes over $800 million in additional funds for education over the next 2 years. Specifically, it includes $305 million of additional resources for at-risk children, children with disabilities, and limited English proficiency students. It also includes $120 million to hire up almost 1,000 additional counselors, social workers, psychologists, and nurses for our public schools. It includes $70 million for the NC Grow program and $95 million in financial aid and other programs to make higher education affordable for students. In the health and human services area, it includes an additional $500 million over the next 2 years. As the governor mentioned, it recommends expanding Medicaid. It also includes $69 million in improvements to child welfare systems and services, and $30 million increase for housing and employment support for people with disabilities. Another hallmark, as the governor mentioned earlier, was strong investments in early education. It includes almost $140 million in a comprehensive early education package, which includes more monies for child care subsidies, as well as North Carolina pre-K reimbursement rates and another 1,500 slots for pre-K across the state, additional money for Smart Start, as well as early intervention services. And finally, in this area, it also includes $90 million to improve wages for early childhood and long-term care workforce. In the general government area, it includes $138 million of additional funds over the next 2 years, including $20 million for affordable housing, $18 million for enhanced analytics and audit capacity across state government, $41 million for state agency IT improvements, and $19 million for veterans and military families. It also includes almost $260 million in the justice and public safety area. This includes $48 million to recruit and retain correctional officers, $27 million for enhanced safety and security equipment, $43 million to hire additional court personnel statewide, as well as additional funds for private attorneys and indigent defense services, and $10 million for sexual assault evidence testing. In the agriculture, natural, and economic resources area, the governor recommends $191 million in additional monies over the next 2 years, including $80 million for water resource development projects, $45 million to support small businesses and agriculture, $26 million to support libraries, museums, and local arts programs, and almost $8 million in the Department of Environmental Quality to mitigate emerging compounds. Governor has a strong environment and clean energy package. In the environment area, it includes $300 million over the biennium, which the biggest part is $210 million of conservation investments in the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund and the Land and Water Fund, $56 million for floodplain buyouts, $20 million for trail construction and planning, and $10 million for farmland preservation. In the clean energy area, it includes $100 million in investments over the biennium, including $50 million in clean energy grants to schools and local governments, $15 million to recruit clean energy jobs, and $23 million to support low-income households to reduce energy costs. Finally, in the infrastructure and resiliency area, the governor's budget includes cash investments over the next 2 years of $1.1 billion. This includes a little over $600 million for UNC system campuses statewide, $324 million in state agency capital recommendations, $100 million for energy efficiency projects, and $106 million to plan and design the large bond projects that will go into more detail on the next slide. And finally, the governor's budget recommends almost $330 million in investments for large information technology projects over the next 2 years. The governor mentioned that we have an unprecedented opportunity to put a bond before the voters in November 2021. Our debt capacity is currently at $4.6 billion over the next 10 years, and we have historically low interest rates. Our most recent bond sale, we got a 1.48% interest rate, which is fantastic. The governor recommends $4.7 billion in a general obligation bond. About 80% of that bond would go to the education area, including $2.5 billion for public schools, almost $800 million for the university system, $500 million to community colleges statewide, $439 million to parks, museums, and zoo, about $430 million to health and safety projects, and then about $48 million for contingencies. The governor's budget in detail is available at the website listed there on the screen. The governor and I are available to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Charlie.
The governor and OCM Director Charlie Peruse will now both be available for questions. Please raise your hand if you have a question for the governor, who will be briefly available, and then again for Director Peruse. Thank you. Our first question will be from Dawn Vaughn with the News and Observer.
Dawn Vaughn with the News and Observer. As everybody knows, the two big issues last time are, in addition to taxes, were teacher raises amounts and Medicaid expansion. So where are your points of negotiation here as spring and into summer, the budget back and forth starts with the Republican leadership?
Now, unlike the last budget cycle we had, I've had numerous conversations with both Republican and Democratic leadership. And one thing we've agreed on is that, first, the people of North Carolina elected us again, so we're back in the same situation that we were. And we owe it to them to do the best that we can to find a path forward. And we've all agreed that everything is on the table. Everything is up for negotiation. I think you saw some of the early indications with the public school bill that we passed a couple of weeks ago on how we can work together. That was a template of me working with Republican leadership and Democratic leadership to try to craft legislation that everybody could be for. We know a budget will be much more complicated, but at the end of the day, there'll be hopefully a lot of things that I want in this budget, some things that I don't, but hopefully we can find an agreement that moves us forward. And as I mentioned earlier with Medicaid expansion, we are really in a different place this year than we were during the last budget fight because of the pandemic, because of the significant additional federal money, and because of the Medicaid managed care transformation that is happening that the legislative leadership wanted to try to get a better rein on tax dollars. All that's different. And so I look forward to negotiations. We do differ on where we are in taxes. We differ probably on level of education investment, although I do not know. I've not seen what the Republicans have proposed in their budget. But I look forward to these discussions. We have a lot to work with. We've got the American Rescue Plan funds that are coming in. So it's exciting to see what we can do, and I look forward to that process. Next question, please.
We have a follow-up. Dawn Vaughn, News and Observer.
Hi, thanks for the follow-up. With Medicare expansion then, do you see that as an issue that can be negotiated outside of the budget process? And then with the raises, can you explain the different amounts where teachers are 10% versus, some state employees 5%?
Medicaid expansion can be discussed and debated at any point during the session. I know we've talked about a number of other health care issues. It could be in that. It could be as part of the budget. It can be discussed anywhere. So we're certainly not confining the discussion of Medicaid expansion in the budget. The raises, I think, are important. And Director Peruse laid out for you the fact that, for the most part, our educators did not get pay raises during the last budget because of the disagreement that we had. That means our teachers and principals, our non-certified public school staff, our community college workers, and our university workers. This budget acknowledges that and provides for about a 10% pay raise for our teachers and principals over the next 2 years, and a 7.5% pay raise for the non-certified personnel, community colleges, and universities. And there are also 3 one-time bonuses for all of those educators as well. Our state employees did get a 5% pay raise in the last budget, and they'll get a 5% pay raise in this budget from what we have proposed, in addition to one-time bonuses in each of the fiscal years. So this is a strong pay package. It acknowledges that our tax revenue is up, that our economy looks bright as we come out of this pandemic. We have to invest in our human capital, our people, particularly our educators, and we hope that we can look at a pay plan like this as we are negotiating this budget. Next question, please.
Our next question is from Michael Hyland with CBS 17.
Hi, this is Michael Hyland from CBS 17. You all pointed out that the budget does not raise taxes. Are you open to cutting taxes at all? There was a bill filed this week in the Senate to cut income taxes, corporate franchise taxes as well. Is that something you think could be done and still accomplish what it is you've set out here in the budget you presented?
Well, my budget proposes tax cuts, and obviously the leadership in the legislature has also proposed tax cuts. They're different kinds. My tax cuts help people who are in lower income brackets and middle income brackets, people who have children and who have dependent parents and grandparents that they're looking after. The earned income tax credits helps people on the margins. So we do propose those tax cuts in my budget. What I've heard from the legislature so far is an across-the-board income tax cut, which I have concerns with because I think it mostly benefits the wealthy. They've proposed an increase in the standard deduction, which I like better because that helps more middle-income people. And of course, they've proposed their corporate tax cuts. With strong revenues, I think we can find some areas of negotiations in cutting taxes for people. We would rather help people who are on the margins and the middle class. But when we think about the fact that we want investments in education, that we want people covered with health care coverage, all of it is going to be negotiated, and I look forward to those discussions. Next question, please.
Our next question is from Gary Robertson with the Associated Press.
Yeah, Governor, I want to talk about the bond package. What are your thoughts, given the fact that in the past the Senate has been more apt to seek to pay for projects through cash as a pay-go plan, and why do you, I know that you think that borrowing is at a good time right now because of low rates, but it still doesn't get over a difference in philosophy about whether you should pay now or pay later for this construction.
Well, thanks for that question. The good thing is I think we've all agreed that everything is on the table. So I think Senator Berger has left that issue open for discussion. The Speaker of the House has been in favor of a bond proposal. Here's the good thing. We can have both here. Because North Carolina has built up cash reserves, we can make down payments on the first couple of years of construction projects across our state. They can't spend money past the 2 years, so you really can't put all of the money in a project for 1-2 year period because they can't do it for that long. But the good thing is we've provided that money and agree that we ought to pay that money up front. But the best long-term way to secure these projects, if you get a bond passed, then you know those projects are going to be funded and you don't have to depend on future legislatures to finish the job because the future legislature may change their mind. When you look at the fact that we passed road bonds a few months ago, 1.48% interest rate, you're just not going to beat that for an interest rate. We're at a time where the economy needs investment in the construction jobs. So to guarantee all of these projects, to get interest rates lower than ever, and to help to invest in the economy, and particularly now that we've rolled off a lot of the state debt, this is a really smart way to move forward. And I look forward to the continued discussions about it. I think we all agree that we need to help build public schools. We're asking for $2.5 billion to help build our public schools, but realize we have an $8 billion problem, and a lot of counties that just cannot afford to do it, particularly the rural counties. And many of the legislative leadership represent rural counties, and this will help them. Next question, please.
Our final question for the governor will be from Laura Leslie with WRAL. Director Charlie Peruse will be available for questions after.
Hi, Governor. This is Laura Leslie from WRAL. Thanks for taking my question. I was curious about the investment in the bond package for health and safety improvements to state government buildings and parks and other facilities. Can you talk a little bit about what those might look like? I mean, is that pandemic related or is that ADA? What are the needs?
So I'm going to let Charlie answer that question, because there are a number of specific buildings that we want to invest in that the state is responsible for in mental health and other areas. Do you have a follow-up, Laura? I'm going to let Charlie answer that. Okay. Well, I'm going to step out and let Charlie answer that question. I would recognize that Monica McGee and Brian Tipton are our sign language interpreters, and we have Jackie and Jasmine Mativier, who are our Spanish language interpreters. And thank you all for being with me today, and Charlie will answer more specific questions about the budget. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Governor. To get back to your question, Laura, the health and safety projects that are included in bond recommendation include monies for substantial renovations at mental health facilities and alcohol and drug treatment centers across the state. In addition, the pieces around the cultural recommendations, that $400 or so million in the bond, are very much education related. There's substantive renovations at the Museum of History, the zoo, and the Museum of Art. And the Museum of History and the zoo, obviously has public school students visiting them sort of throughout the year. And so those were the investments in the bond in that area.
Our next question is from Jonah Kaplan with ABC 11.
Oh, good afternoon. This is Jonah Kaplan with ABC 11. I'm curious about the timing of the bond proposal. Even with the census and delays, it's potential that some municipalities won't even hold elections this fall, and there's no statewide race on the ballot this fall. So why the urgency to get this on the ballot as soon as possible? And is it really realistic to have it done and get voter support?
Yes, sir. Sort of, and this gets out a little bit at Gary's question earlier. The approach that the governor's budget takes is a hybrid one. He does recommend $1.1 billion in cash for infrastructure and resiliency. And essentially any capital project that was under $15 million that was requested from the universities or state agencies would be cash funded, because $15 million projects tend to have about a 2-year life. Anything over $15 million, the governor recommends that those larger projects, which might span 3 to 5 years, be funded with a blend of cash and bond to provide that certainty. And so that was sort of the approach he took, is immediate and small cash, longer term for certainty, bond. In addition, to get at your November 2021 timeframe, we took that into consideration, understanding that there are no statewide races. We did include money in the governor's budget, I think close to $15 million or so, to pay for the costs, to provide the information that would be associated with putting that bond on the ballot in November. That has been done in the past, and it's an operational cost that we included in the governor's budget.
We have a follow-up, Jonah Kaplan, ABC 11.
My next question really, I guess, is about leverage, because for better or worse in North Carolina, there's no government shutdown if there's no agreement on a budget compromise. And the 2020 election wasn't enough to push the two sides together. So where does Governor Cooper think he'll be able to get the leverage and be able to actually get the sense of urgency to get a compromise done this year, even though he hasn't in his first term?
You know, I think the governor, did a great job answering that question. What I would add to it is, as have started this long session, we've definitely seen a different tone in our conversation with members of the General Assembly. As the governor mentioned, we're looking forward to building on the momentum of the agreement that he reached with legislative leaders on the school opening bill. I know from my standpoint, I've been having constant briefings with the senior appropriations chairs in both the House and the Senate, as well as the Speaker and the pro tem staff. So there's a lot more conversations going on right now than there has been in past years. We all understand that this is a process, and we start that process off by presenting the governor's budget and look forward to working together over the next few years to pass a comprehensive budget that helps all North Carolinians.
Our next question is from Colin Campbell with North Carolina Insider.
Hi, I wanted to ask about the funding that's in there for state government building security upgrades. I see it specifically singles out the Department of Revenue headquarters and the Supreme Court building. Was curious why those buildings were selected, and if the need for this stems at all from some of the events we've seen in Washington, D.C. and here in Raleigh in the last year.
It did, yes, sir. And, we all understand that the events over the past year, and especially January 6th, sort of make us all take a step back and say, what do we need to do to ensure the safety of our buildings and the people who work in those buildings? We had specific recommendations from the Department of Revenue in the court system to shore up some areas around those buildings. We also put some general money for additional security cameras and other things for the downtown complex. And so as a whole, we tried to look at a comprehensive view to understand how we can secure our buildings, and that recommendation does that.
Our final question today is from Rose Hoban with North Carolina Health News.
Hi, Charlie. It's Rose Hoban with NC Health News. I was wondering about, I've seen some different numbers on the Medicaid expansion sort of benefit to the state. I understand it would be about $1.7 billion from the feds, and it would cost North Carolina, I've heard, anywhere from between like $450 to $600 million to administer. I'm wondering if you have a better bead on that, and also if you have any thoughts about ways to, raise revenue to pay for some of that. Are there hospital assessments or an assessment on insurance companies that you folks have thought about?
Rose, thank you for your question. And the governor mentioned that the federal government has provided a great incentive for the non-Medicaid expansion states to expand going forward. In the American Rescue Plan, that incentive would provide about $1.7 billion in additional federal monies to North Carolina over the next 2 years if we choose to expand. Let's put that $1.7 billion into context. The non-federal share to expand Medicaid to cover 600,000 additional North Carolinians to provide them with health care costs about $350 to $400 million a year as it ramps up. And so with that $1.7 billion of additional money, we could cover that non-federal share for 4 to 5 years without having to, talk about hospital assessments or any other funds from the state to meet that non-federal share requirement. And so this is a very good incentive that the feds are providing us. It would cover the non-federal share for the next 4 or 5 years, and there's no better time than the present to expand Medicaid. Thank you for your questions this afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Hope everyone has a great day.